Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I'm Bill Gladden, Executive Director for French and Pickering Creeks Conservation Trust. Since French and Pickering was established by Sam and Eleanor Morris in 1967, we've worked with landowners, townships, foundations, state, county, local partners to purchase, and then we also monitor conservation easements, created parks, nature preserves, and protected environmentally sensitive land, leading to the protection of more than 13,600 acres in northern Chester County. We work daily to protect the scenic and cultural landscapes that surround you, to create opportunities for you and your families to connect with nature through environmental education, public trails at our two nature preserves, which are the Thomas P. Bentley Nature Preserve and Templin Woods Preserve, and to protect critical habitat and ecosystems for the non-human residents in our neighborhood. Tonight's lecture is brought to you by a wonderful corporate partner sponsor, Patriot Dealerships. They are your #1 Chevrolet, Buick, and GMC dealer group in Bucks and Montgomery counties. And the owners, Jason and Melissa Owens, are residents of Chester County and Charlestown Township. They have an eased property and they were attracted to this area for the natural open spaces and want to really help give back to the community that they're a part of by helping to sponsor even more of our good work. From the moment you step into one of their state-of-the-art dealerships, you can expect to be treated like family each and every visit, whether you're in search of a new vehicle, a used vehicle, just stopping by for a quick oil change. Your experience and comfort are their top priority. They have an extensive inventory of new and pre-owned cars, as well as competitive lease specials, finance options, and expert automotive services. And in addition to their dedication to excellent customer service, they also pride themselves on giving back to their local community. So tonight's lecture is about traditional turf lawns, which are common throughout our suburban and urban landscapes, yet they offer few ecological benefits and they require frequent maintenance. We're so glad that we are joined this evening by Nikki Lee and Orsi Lazar from the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources as they help us reimagine our outdoor spaces. Orsi and Nikki will discuss community forest efforts, ecological benefits of meadows, techniques for planting trees in meadows, and maintenance tips. Nikki is an Upper Southeast Regional Watershed Forestry Specialist for the Bureau of Forestry within the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And she's been in her role for almost 3 years, helping Pennsylvania landowners establish acres of riparian forest buffers, meadows, and upland forests on their properties. She also coordinates with partners in southeastern Pennsylvania to help further the watershed forestry goals. Orsi is an urban forester, an ISA certified arborist, and a PA certified horticulturalist in sustainable landscapes. Her somewhat unconventional path to forestry began with a master's degree in ecology and in molecular and cell biology, and she's continued with over 20 years of experience in landscape design and management, project management, and education. Orsi became the first community tree specialist at Pennsylvania DCNR's Urban and Community Forestry Program 2.5 years ago, and she helped shape this growing program to better serve communities by building trust, identifying opportunities, finding creative solutions to challenges, and joining us all on wonderful programs like here tonight. So thank you both for being here very much, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you for having us. I will start off with just talking about a little bit of the program area we work within the DCNR, within the Bureau of Forestry. And within the Bureau of Forestry, there's a small group of people with like 3 different program areas, and that's what I'm going to cover first. And then Nikki will talk about the more details about the lawn conversion, lawn to habitat conversion. So we're within the Bureau of Forestry, and our program area called the Rural and Community Forestry. We provide technical assistance, funding, educational resources, and connect partners. And all of us do a little bit different work, but we work together in the partnership. In many cases and projects, we might visit sites together or pass information to our customers or residents and municipalities or nonprofit organizations. I work for the Urban and Community Forestry Program, or UCF. So that's the first one I talk about. That's we're really working to increase the capacity of municipalities and nonprofit organizations to better be able to plant more trees, but also fund projects to care for the trees that exist or the trees that are newly planted. We're also supporting workforce development. We know that we need a lot more people to care for our landscapes in all different areas, whether it be it arborists or land managers, meadow managers. We also have support community engagement and provide different educational programs. One of them is the tree tender training, if any of you are familiar with it, that started over 30 years ago by PHS, the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. The second area is what Nikki is going to talk about later, is the Watershed Forestry. They have two program areas, the riparian forest buffer and the lawn to habitat program, which one of the sites says lawn conversion, but that was the old name. We call it lawn to habitat into forests and meadows. And then the third program area is the woodland stewardship. If any of you own wooded lots or know somebody else who owns woodland, this program is, we have some staff that can help with technical assistance and provide guidance on how to care for those forests to the areas to more sustainable management practices. They also can advise on agroforestry and how to get payment for like carbon markets and forests, which certainly not my area of expertise, but we have experts in woodland stewardship that could help in that area. Next slide, please. So hopefully all of you are really understand the benefit of trees, that lots of different benefits. We have economic, environmental, social benefits. And and here these small images just show some of the benefits that the trees provide to us. And it really doesn't matter where the trees are. They could be planted in urban areas, in communities. They could be planted in buffers or any other areas. They cool the air, they help absorb water, so reduce flooding. They can reduce temperature. Sometimes if we're placing trees in communities where people live, where there's a lot of infrastructure, we can place trees in the ways that they will more likely reduce, or they have bigger impact in reducing the temperatures in the communities, or they can capture more rainwater than other places. But any tree anywhere is always providing good benefits. And they also help with mental and physical health and increase property values and a lot of other things. Okay. Next slide. So even though a lot of times we're talking about urban forestry, the urban forestry is really the combination of lots of different trees in inhabited. It could be a municipality, it could be a township, a city, or even just a small borough. And urban forestry contains all the trees in that community. So they could be public or private land. They all provide benefits, and managing all those trees together is what community forestry or urban forestry is. We prefer to use the term community because a lot of times when we use urban, people might not recognize that that's some of them. They're all included in the, so community forestry is what we prefer to use because we work with all type of communities and all different size of communities. It doesn't have to be just cities, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. We can work with, yeah, the smallest boroughs or townships, all different sizes. Next. So yeah, we know that the trees provide benefits. We also have to recognize that trees cost money to care for them, regardless of where they grow. And some of the direct cost of the cost for caring for trees is obviously the direct cost of planting and caring for trees. We also have infrastructure interference costs, so sidewalk damage from trees. We have utility lines problems. We also can talk about the opportunity cost of if we have trees in certain areas, then we can't use that space for something else, although there's certain ways to manage that, and we can use different techniques, usually a little bit more costly ways to plant trees in places that like parking lots and other places. So we can have both trees and infrastructure in some cases. And also, people might have allergies. I certainly have pollen allergy for trees in this time of the year, or leaf pickup or other costs associated with trees. We also need to recognize that there are a lot of costs associated with not caring for trees, which will be in the next slide. And if we're not caring for the trees, we can save the cost of caring for the trees, but we're losing on, so next slide, please. We have the cost of deferred maintenance for later date. This means that if you're not caring for young trees, if you're not watering them, the trees might die, so it's a waste of money. Maybe they're not going to grow well, or they have diseases and we lose trees. If we're simply not planting trees, we're going to lose the benefits of having trees. It just, we can't appreciate trees. We also can see that trees might decline faster. So it can increase liability for trees. If the trees are not pruned properly when early age, then they can have much bigger problems later that are more costly. So I really encourage people to have their trees checked, especially in areas like near the house or near sidewalks, to make sure that they're cared for properly. And there's really good resource. I didn't put it in, but if anybody is interested, I can put it in the chat later. Is that treesaregood.org is the website that the International Society of Arboriculture created for property owners, and it includes a lot of good information about how to care for trees properly. I would like to emphasize that a lot of trees are planted improperly and mulched incorrectly. They're often planted too deep, which can really impact the life expectancy and the health of the trees. So it is really important to learn how to do it properly, and that website that I include in the chat that can help you learn about proper ways of caring for trees. Next slide, please. So we have lots of different resources that we can share with people who our primary target is we really work with municipal staff or shade tree commissions, environmental advisory councils, all different kind of nonprofits. It could be schools or even like cemetery friend groups or park friend groups, and help them better manage trees and public or publicly accessible land. And we're just helping grow their tree canopy and provide the benefits for people that trees can provide. We have this map that's available for anybody to use. That's called a DCNR Tree Keeper. That's available. If you go to the DCNR Urban and Community Forestry website, you can find this mapping. There's a link to it, and it shows the high priority areas where we tend to work the most is the grade areas. And we provide funding, so we provide a lot of technical assistance, and as the funding changes over time, we might dive into more technical assistance if the funding sources are not as abundant as they have been in the last couple of years. But the funding is available for all kind of activities caring for trees, including tree inventory and canopy planning. Tree planting and care, which is the most common that people are aware of. Also funding urban wood utilization. hazardous tree removal, which can be really important for communities when people might have a lot of street trees that are in bad shape, and residents might not want to have new trees planted because they're concerned about the care for those trees. So removing hazardous trees can be a trust building exercise, and it can be really helpful. We also can fund urban food forests, workforce development, and community engagement. And I just put it in the last thing that I just wanted to mention on this slide is that we have the Keystone Tree Fund that people can click when they're renewing their driver's license or car registration. That's one of the options that people can click when they're doing the registration online, and you donate, I think it's $3 each time. So that can support our work. And now, since Arbor Day this year, we have an online donation option. So people who are inclined to support our work, you can donate to our projects, and you can fund our work. The money goes both to urban and community forestry and some riparian forest buffer projects. So we appreciate any support in that regard. I think there's this might be the last slide. So it might be hard to read, but maybe when you get if you get the slides later, this is just an overview of the different grant programs for our projects. And we have funding going through the BRC's, the Bureau of Recreation, and they're managing our grants. The project types we have through the Watershed Forestry program, we have the lawn to habitat program, which here it says lawn conversion, but it's lawn to habitat. That you have to have a lawn area, and that can be turned into a meadow or forest. And that's what Nikki's going to talk about later in the presentation. Or the riparian forest buffers and other program area. And we have the urban and community forestry program. Urban and community forestry projects have to happen in public or publicly accessible land. As I said, so it could be like street trees, schools, cemeteries, other municipal parks. While the watershed forestry programs could be public or private land. So there's a big difference between the two. The watershed forestry projects, they require a 20-year land owner agreement, which we don't require because all the land that we work with are publicly owned. So we know the owners, and we don't require agreement with them. Here's a list of activities that are eligible, which I already covered, so I'm gonna skip over that. Anybody who's applying for the grant can bundle multiple different sites, and they can bundle different projects. So we have some grantees that applied for projects that include watershed forestry and urban and community forestry projects in one application. So you don't have to split it into two. The minimum grant request is $50,000, and they all require 20% match. So that means that the 20% added to the 50,000, it turns out to be $62,500 minimum project size. And eligibility could be municipalities, agents, nonprofits, and land trusts. And anybody who's interested in whether applying for our grant or just reaching out for technical assistance, we really encourage people to reach out to our specific regional staff. So if you're looking at urban or community forestry work, reach out to the community forestry staff. There's contact on our website. If you're looking at watershed forestry projects, talk to Nikki or whoever is in your regional person, because they will have the up-to-date information about all the different programs. And it's just, programs can change. And then the Bureau of Recreation and Conservation staff can advise about grant application, but they're more experts on how to apply for a grant. The project area specialists are our regional staff. So those are the first they should be the first contact for anybody who's interested in these projects. And then we can help you find whether if the grant applies, or if you're looking for technical assistance, or finding organizations that we can connect you with, so you can bundle projects and make a project eligible for grant application if possible. And I think that might have been my last slide, so I let Nikki take over.
Thanks so much, Orsi. Okay, so I'm going to cover some information on not lawn conversion. I always catch myself saying that. Lawn to habitat, and specifically lawn to meadow. The reason we changed that is just because conversion was like a little bit difficult to explain. So like our main goal is just to create new habitat. So that's kind of why we made the little switch there. Okay, so I'm going to start with the Great Green Lawn. So the thing that we're all used to. It's looking really good right now in May. There is actually around 2 million acres of lawn in Pennsylvania. And this makes it the largest irrigated crop in America because of the size. And lawns contribute to increasing stormwater pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and they are also ecological deserts. And then this is just kind of showing the cycle of lawn care. We know that there's a lot of mowing. At least once a week people mow. I sometimes see people mowing twice a week. And watering is also a really big component. In Pennsylvania, we're lucky that we don't have very strict water laws as bad as out in the West, where it's very conserved. So people can water their lawn as much as they want, basically. And also fertilizer is a big aspect of lawns. A lot of people use fertilizer on them. And as you can see, it is also a good resource in moderation. So you can see the kids kind of playing out in the lawn. So it's not all bad, but we definitely want to limit it and use it for specific reasons instead of just because. So reconsidering the American lawn. This is a really pretty meadow out by a forest. Have a nice path walking through. So conservation landscaping is what a meadow is technically zoned under. And what I'm talking about is a perennial native with wildflowers and grasses. So we want mostly native species in these meadows. They would be maintained to arrest succession. So there will be some mowing involved in this, but it's usually once or twice a year. And then after a few years, it's actually once every 3 or 5 years is kind of the mowing schedule. And the reason there is any mowing is to keep out woodies, because or else it'll turn into a forest eventually. They are also temporarily variable and should always be dominated by native and desired species. So keeping out those invasives is very important. They have comparably more long-term maintenance than woods, but still a lot less than a lawn for sure. They are also planted as one large plot, and they can be planted via broadcast seeding or using a no-till drill. And then this is kind of a perfect example of what we're doing. What we want to see when we go on site visits is we want to start with a mowed, maintained grass. A lot of people wonder, oh, like if I just stop mowing, you know, that's a meadow. But unfortunately, because we live in Southeast PA, the invasives will just take over so quickly that it won't be a functioning ecosystem like you want it to be. So that's when you kind of have to step in and you have to put in the plants that you want and make sure you take out the plants that you do not want. So here's a perfect example of a meadow over here in the corner. And Our native meadows get pretty tall, like they could be 3 to 6 feet. Some of our natives are very tall. So here are some benefits of this conversion. So starting out with turf. Turf has compacted soils and shallow root systems. If you ever pulled up a blade of glass, you're kind of looking at maybe an inch of roots. It also contributes to downstream flooding. There's nothing really stopping the water or allowing it to penetrate into the soils. Pesticide and fertilizer applications are used very frequently with lawns. There's also that ongoing maintenance cost of mowing it once or twice a week, fertilizers, all that stuff. There's also the carbon emissions for maintenance from doing all that mowing. And turf grasses are these short, non-native grass monocultures that kind of, it's just sterile. There's not really much happening. It's just one thing kind of going on, which leads them to be ecological dead zones. And then what we're looking for is a native plant ecosystem landscape. Native plants have very deep root systems, which help improve soil health. It helps with water to drain into soil so that the roots can suck it up. Yeah, so water infiltration. So that also helps reduce flooding. Nutrient and pollutant processing. So once the pollutants or nutrients get absorbed, it's kind of down in the soil and it's getting taken up into plants instead of kind of running out and getting into streams and different waterways. This lowers long-term maintenance. There's also a reduce in carbon emissions and increased carbon storage. There's also diverse textures and colors all year long. And if you plant it the right way, you could definitely have different things blooming at different times for the whole year, other than, winter. There's also improved wildlife and pollinator habitat, kind of just giving wildlife somewhere to live, feeding native bees and kind of making them happy too. And then this is just a really great example of some non-native plant roots. If you look at the turf grass, it's like nothing. It's probably like an inch or two. And then some of the non-natives, they get down to like 2 or 3 feet. But if you look at 9 bark, it gets down to 15 or 16 feet into the soil. And then there's also a case for native plants when it comes to insects and other things. So an example here is the monarch butterfly. And part of its life cycle, it relies on milkweed, which is a native plant. And without the milkweed, the caterpillars will not be able to turn into butterflies. Like, they need to eat the milkweed to survive. And I also wanted to kind of include this little food web, food chart, kind of showing that, we kind of start with the plants, and then those help feed our insects, which I know not everyone's a fan of. But then after that, we kind of got our amphibians, we got our birds, we got our mice, and then it just kind of goes up from there. We feed rabbits, fox, and then hawks kind of at the top. So that's also important to remember. There will be unexpected guests. So ticks like to hang out in meadows, wasps and hornets, especially they like taking over tree tubes, which is unfortunate. Mammals will move in. They will love it there. Another unexpected guest could be neighbors. So it is important to have some conversations before you kind of do this. And also code enforcement officers you kind of have to watch out for as well. So that kind of leads me to weed ordinances. It's important to communicate with your municipality before implementing a meadow on your property. Also to work with a local environmental advisory council. Try to educate and inform neighbors about what you're doing even before you start. It's kind of a good practice. And then implement cues to care to kind of show that it's purposeful and you're taking care of it. I will show some examples in a few slides. And then we're going to get into planting. So basic meadow planting. This is what we do. We like to start with a sterile lawn site, as little invasives as possible, because one, really competitive invasive could take out an entire meadow, unfortunately. So it's really important to start with that sterile site. You want to plan and plant with intention. You want to be able to remove the turf grass. That's a very important step. Let the plants fill in the gaps, spread the seed mixes, and then you want the right plants in the right place, and then to nudge the planting along. And we don't do this. So we don't usually start with a failed conversion. We don't let things grow wild. Like I said, you don't just stop mowing and then there's your meadow. It doesn't really work like that, unfortunately. Overseed into turf grass, we don't do. Mulching isn't required. We also don't use live plant plugs. They're really expensive. They don't always, the success rate isn't always great. So we like to use seed mixes. And we like to use native plants. We don't use non-native plants. We also don't need to add nutrients, amend the soils, or water. Kind of let nature do its thing. And we also don't want to over-manage the planting. Okay, so these are kind of our first considerations when we're looking at a site and we want to do a meadow. So we want to look at soils. We want to see what kind of soils we have. Does it drain fast? Is it more wet? Is it dry? Is it in between? The light level can be very important too. Full sun is great for meadows. Full shade is not great. We're looking for more full sun to partly shady for meadows to thrive. And then climate, seasonal cycles and minimum temperatures. You want to make sure that when you're seeding, it's during the right temperature. You want it to be between like the spring season and the fall season, no winter or summer kind of thing. Other considerations are vertical structure. So you want to know how tall you want the meadow. Like I said, the smallest meadow you could probably have is like 2 or 3 feet tall. And then bloom period. If you plan it out right, you should have a bloom pretty much every week, like if something else is blooming, something different. You want different colors, different color flowers and grasses, things like that. And then drifts. And this is just an example of a typical mix that's used. And this would be for more like in between or dry site. And you can see that we have some grass species. We have some coneflowers. We have black-eyed Susans, milkweed, things like that. And it's also important to try to get the closest ecotype you can. It's not always going to be available to always get Pennsylvania, but you can try to get the bordering states. That's pretty good. And then here is examples of cues to care that I was kind of talking about. So, you could put up like a little wood fence to kind of show what was happening. Some people like to mow along the edge, and that actually helps with keeping invasives out too. So I highly recommend mowing around your meadow and keeping that clean. And then, you could add some rocks around it, just kind of make it intentional, like almost make it look like a garden, but don't treat it like a garden. Okay, so we're gonna start with site preparation. So the goal of this is to remove all of the existing turf cover and expose the soil so you get really good seed to soil contact. So you want to remove turf cover, and you could go this 2 different routes. So you can use an herbicide application to kill the turf grass and the weeds, and then you could go the organic route as well with solarization and sheet mulching. I will say that the herbicide one is more effective and a lot quicker. And then the organic methods take a lot longer and do not always work, unfortunately. So then after you get your turf gone, you want to make sure you expose the soil, and that also depends on what type of method you're going to use for seeding. So if you're doing a broadcast seed where you're kind of using your friends and you're walking it yourself and spreading the seed by hand, you're going to want to make sure that your turf residue is completely removed. Like you want it to be all soil, kind of like when you're planting vegetables and stuff like that. And then if a professional is using a seed drill, they can actually plant into some turf residue using the drill. And then this is an example of broadcast seeding. So it's kind of you and some friends coming out, spreading the seed. You want to prepare the seed mix. You want to spread it. And when you're making the seed mix, you want to also make sure there's like some type of filler or something. A lot of people use cat litter, sand, stuff like that, to make sure that the seed gets distributed, or else it will not go very far. And then you kind of want to work in the seed. So then going back around and kind of stomping it in a little bit. And after that, you want to make sure it's covered so the wind and the rain doesn't displace the seeds. So spreading weed-free straw is also a really great idea. And a lot of people also use nurse crops that pop up pretty quick to protect the site. So that is also another option. And then this is a seed drill that a lot of our contractors use, which is a very big equipment, which not everyone has. And it's really important that these have the native no-till drill box. And the native box actually has 2 different spots. We have fluffy seeds, and then we have more round and heavier seeds. And the box kind of separates them and then puts them out together at the same time, because or else all the heavy seeds would go to at the bottom, and all the light ones would go to the top, and then you would not have a very even meadow. And you want to make sure that the drill is calibrated to how many seeds you want and what rate. And then you can drill. And then after that, you'll also want to do the same thing and spread some weed-free straw or add a nurse crop or both. And then for establishment, that's kind of year 1 and year 2. That's when you want to do infrequent establishment clippings at about 8 to 10 inches once the plants get over around 15 inches high. And this is to help get rid of invasives, woodies that are also popping up and that grow a lot quicker. And you want to make sure that you do not cut them lower than 8 to 10 inches, or you will kill your seedlings. So that is very important. And then during this period, you might need some herbicide spot treatments, but you want to make sure that you know what you're spraying and that you're kind of doing it on individual plants at this period. You don't want to pull plants because a lot of the seedlings will look different than they will as adults. So you just want to kind of help it along. It's not going to look great and amazing at this time. Like maybe a few things will flower, but kind of around like year 3 is when it will look like its best. So that leads to maintenance. So maintenance is a very key aspect of making these meadows flourish. You want to stop mowing the entire site. At around like year 3 or 5, you kind of want to switch to spot or rotational mowing. So mowing one area 1 year, maybe the next a different year, which will allow wildlife to still kind of use it, and then you'll have your blooms and stuff in other spots. So it's a good idea. And that will keep out invasives and woodies and things like that. Then you can also start hand pulling invasives during this time once everything's established and you know that the plants are grown. And then you can do spot herbicide applications where you're kind of just going out and you're just spraying specific plants that you want to remove to control noxious and invasive non-native plants, so they do not take over the meadow, which is really important. And then just like a really quick note on herbicide, the long-term benefits of habitat restoration kind of outweigh impacts of short-term use of herbicide to get those plants to grow. So it is a very necessary tool in our work, but it's used in moderation and by the right people who know what they're doing. So, and then here's a really quick example. So this is Pleasant View Meadow, and this is 17 days before seeding. So you can see that most of the turf is gone. There's a little bit of residue because I believe they did use a drill for this. And this is kind of what you want it to look like. Nice starting spot. And then this is 42 days after seeding. So you can kind of see the drill lines of where they seeded using the drill. And yeah, this is kind of what it'll look like. It'll look like a little spotty, not much kind of going on, but don't panic. They're growing. They actually like to grow their roots and other stuff before they actually kind of pop out and put out flowers. And then this is 407 days after seeding, and I think this was definitely a showy mix. So a lot of flowers, as you can see, which is really pretty. So meadows sleep, then creep, and finally leap. So kind of showing the sleep, slowly creeping, and then here's the big leap, probably at like year 3. Then a few more pictures. I really love this site. It was really pretty. And here's a few other examples of some natives and some meadows. And then here is kind of another cue to care could be some paths through your meadows. That will actually help with ticks and other pests kind of getting on you. So a path's always a good idea as well. And then that leads me to some technical assistance that we provide. We can help with seed mixes, design and layout of your meadow. We can provide implementation recommendations, connect you with funding, connect you with landscape professionals. So if you want to use a drill, but you obviously don't have one, we can connect you with landscape professionals to help with that. And then we have a lot of resources on the website where you can find invasive plant fact sheets, native plant nurseries around, native garden templates, and some other fun stuff. And then some quick financial assistance kind of stuff, where she did already kind of talk about this, but just really quick. We can discuss your goals and ability to care for planting. We can determine eligibility for funding, determining different funding options. So if it doesn't work out with us, we can help find you funding with a different organization. We can also connect you with appropriate funders. Another thing that is good to know, our program parameters and funding varies year to year. So there might not be an option currently available for your project. You will be asked to sign a landowner agreement, and then individual landowners do not receive funding directly. Okay, and that's it for me. Thank you. Do we have any questions that we can?
There was a question about, do you approach meadows differently in areas with heavy deer browse, which seems to describe everything around our area, unfortunately.
No, that is a great question. It's hard. I'm trying to think. You could use some fencing to kind of deter them. I also heard that you could plant things that they don't like, kind of like around the planting. Maybe some like pointy shrubs and stuff like that to kind of protect it. And then they won't realize about all the good and juicy stuff on the
How do I
on the middle that's like native
back?
and good.
I turned myself like the whole way off.
And there also are some seed mixes that are advertised that are deer resistant. So I would recommend checking those out too, using some more species that they aren't as interested in.
Yeah, there's definitely some species that deer doesn't love as much as others. In my experience, there's nothing that deer wouldn't eat if it's really hungry, or maybe it's a young one that's just kind of testing out all different things.
Yeah.
I know that Rutgers University has a list of species. If you look up, just do a Google search or whatever search of Rutgers deer resistant plants, and you can find their website, and it lists plants, I think, based on species name or how palatable they are to deer. So it kind of categories from rarely damaged to frequently badly, severely damaged. So there's nothing that deer wouldn't eat, but it just how frequently and how severely the plants are damaged. But there's certainly some plants like mountain mints. I don't think deer tends to eat
Yeah.
those. Sedges, if anybody's planting more like shade loving plants in like shade gardens mostly, some of the plants are less favored by deer than others, but there's really nothing that's 100% deer proof. I wish. Hunting might help.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. There's some more questions.
Okay.
Are there a list of environmental advisory councils in Chester County? I'm sure that there is.
I can answer that. If there's a website called Municipal Statistics, and that can give information about like municipal officials and borough managers, and it also lists the Environmental Advisory Council contact. I assume it's like the chair of the advisory councils. If somebody searches, and you can search by county, so you can just put in the county name and select, you just looking for the advisory council, and then you can find a list of them. I don't know how up to date it's supposed to be up to date, but I have not tested, so I don't know. Fortunately, they don't have the shade tree commissions in there, but the environmental advisory councils are listed in.
Yeah, I
It's
saw the question. Yeah, you answered the question. I was just going to say also, if you're interested in locally, you can just go to your municipal website, and they'll probably have a list of all of the volunteer committees and commissions, and so it would be there as well. But the question was the whole county, which would go to that website. But if you're going bottom up, you can do that too.
That's a great point.
I don't know if I put things in the question answer. Can you share that with people later? I can type in here. I don't know if everybody can see that information or not. Advisory
I'm gonna make sure to
council.
record that for you, and we can save that for later.
Yeah, we do send out, Shelby does an email to all the people who registered with their emails, so we can put that link in the email that goes out as well to folks.
Yeah. Well, I see
Lesser celandine. Ooh.
lesser celandine. That's a tricky one. So if you don't have trees nearby, you could use a really thick layer of like wood chip mulch kind of thing. And even just like regular arborist chip is what I recommend people use around trees, or if you're trying to suffocate certain type of plants. And that works well. It doesn't block the airflow and the water flow as much as some of the other, like the more processed mulches that can pack down and prevent the air to get into the soil and reduce the soil quality and impact the soil life. So a really thick layer of mulch, but it has to be like, I don't know, over 12 inches over years. The other one is if anybody is willing to use pesticides, herbicide use really early in the season. I think ideally it should be used before the plants flower. And sometimes if you have, I recommend people if they have some, if it's in the flower garden, when you already have some plants that you want to keep, you can lift those up, wash off all the soil, so make sure that there's not a single of those little bulblets remain on the plants. You can set them aside, maybe keep them, just wrap them in damp newspaper until you treat the area with it has to be something systemic pesticides. It's kind of like glyphosate or something that will get into the bulblets and kill the plants. If you're just using vinegar or anything that just burns the surface off, it will not be effective. So it's just not worth the time. It's not gonna get rid of the lesser celandine. So fortunately, there's not really good easy answer to that one. I have noticed in my little meadow strip, which was planted using plugs, but it's just a really tiny area, that I have sedges. I have the creek sedge, Carex amphibola intermingled between the flowering plants, and where I have the dense sedge coverage, I do not have lesser celandine. I have celandine where there's open spaces. So some kind of plant that would be creating dense coverage all year round. So sedges that are evergreen, or maybe like a coral bell coverage, packer orel could help. Anything that creates dense evergreen cover could fight off lesser celandine. But if it's something that comes up later in the season, the lesser celandine already has done its life cycle, so it's not gonna be effective in controlling it. So.
I also want to mention that DCNR has really good fact sheets on controlling different invasives. So you can kind of just Google like DCNR something control, and then it'll kind of pop up on. So you could like, Google in lesser.
Yep.
And it should bring you right up to it, hopefully. And that'll give you some different options. It usually gives you manual options and then herbicide options as well.
Yes, I just put the and either DCNR is good. I also recommend Penn State Extension sometimes had good information. Always go to reliable sources. I don't recommend using blogs or Facebook chats and other things that are, a lot of times there's just a lot of misinformation or old information that might have been thought to be correct years ago and not anymore. So it's really just if you want to get up-to-date information and whatever is verified and evidence driven, then DCNR or state extension. Penn State Extension has good information. A lot of other states have good extension websites that can be helpful. What else is there?
A minimum size, any minimum size for grant applications?
Yeah, it depends on the funding source. But it's usually half an acre minimum. And then we like to do kind of continuous area. So like a continuous acre. I mean, continuous half acre if they wanted to do a half acre. Yeah.
If you are watching this and you have an easement with French and Pickering, you can contact our office as well. And sometimes we've done a couple of applications and we've aggregated them and tried to find adjacency where we can, or try and create those contiguous linear strips that can be very helpful, especially when you don't have a lot to work with to begin with.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Other-
I
Any
don't
other
see any additional questions. Yeah, so that's great. You guys must have done a very good job preparing for the audience. Yes, you've covered the questions, and wonderful grant programs. We are really, the timing couldn't really have been better for our community here when we've had so many invasives and so much transition, and people have lost some of the resources that they care about so much, and how to replace them, what to replace them with, how to do the right thing for the immediate present, to cut down on their costs and maintenance, like you said, reduce their inputs, and create something that's a nice legacy that'll last and really be ultimately almost self-sustaining, except for maybe a little bit of a trimming, or down at Longwood in the southern part of the county, they'll do some prescribed burning, but for really massive things. But the same kind of keeping that from succeeding into a woodland forest again. But anyway, well, thank you both very much for making time out of your incredibly busy schedules and putting that together. It'll be up online on YouTube for people to enjoy and learn from, watch again, tell your friends. So thank you very much, and good luck with everything across the Commonwealth, especially in Southeast PA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Have a good evening, everyone.